Hey, happy Friday, everybody. Welcome. Welcome. I I'm excited to see everyone. As the long timers know, we've got an audacious goal to make this your favorite meeting of the month, your favorite professional meeting of the month. And I know sometimes Fridays it's hard for you to jump on, wrapping up other things, but it's also a way for me to look forward to the end of the week to just say hi. Dwayne, this is like my secular professional church, and maybe we need to do it once a week, but it's like come together in some L&D fellowship. Let's support each other, right? Let's hear some wisdom around leadership development. Is it feeling that way for you too?
Yeah, it makes me want to say amen. Makes me want to say amen, Kevin.
Give me an amen. Jen gave us a thumbs up. Now, I don't know where the amen emoji is, but we'll take a thumbs up. Thanks for that, Jen. And hey, introduce yourself in the chat. We'd love to know if this is your first time or not. We always like to welcome our first timers. And even if it's not your first time, we like you to warm up your fingers. This is kind of a big question. We're at the end. We just finished Q1, right? We're a couple weeks into Q2. And I like to sort of do end of year reviews, quarterly reviews, even monthly reviews. And so 1/4 of the way through our year, how are we feeling about our goals, personal or professional? What are our wins, personally and professionally? Type them in the chat. I'm really curious about that. Kim, thanks for that warm welcome in that. Hillary's got a happy Friday. It is feeling like probably because spring is around the corner. We're knocking on wood. But this is great. Let's see, biggest win, home building happening. I love that. Anyone else moving in anywhere? They're coming in. Greetings from Indianapolis. Hey, Michael. Trish, always good to see you. It's been a bit, yeah. First meeting, Jason, welcome. You're going to see it's not like a webinar you've ever been to before. You can kind of tell that already, right? If like Jason and others is a first timer, my name is Kevin Kruse. I'm the founder and CEO of LeadX. This is a leadership development community of practice. It's not a client community practice. So you don't need to be a LeadX client to join. We try to keep this invitation only with practitioners. The LeadX folks stay out of the breakout room so you can just have a nice, honest, candid conversation with your peers. And like I said, our goal is to bring you education, case studies, and peer building, network building stuff once a month so that it's advancing your career and helping you to bring new ideas back to your folks, the rest of your team members. The agenda today, this is a 1-hour format today. We're going to be moving fast as always. I'm excited because many of you know, LeadX is a partner with Hogan. Love their assessments because they are tightly aligned with the 5-factor model of personality, great data, great validity. And they have hot off the press research looking at gender equity and addressing some of the myths about female leadership, women in leadership. We will do a quick breakout because, again, you need to dig your well before you're thirsty. I'm talking about building your social network. It's a crazy time, man. What a crazy week, right? Whiplash in the headlines, whiplash in business. We need allies. We need superheroes in our corner, and we want you to meet 3 or 4 new superheroes who will have your back. And, we added a couple months ago just a fun thing to wrap things up. Top 5 plays of the month. Head nod to ESPN if there's any ESPN fans out there, where I just share some things that caught my eye, research-wise or in the press, loosely related to human capital. So we've got a full schedule here. My co-host, again, is the Dwayne Bess, great leader himself and longtime professional in L&D and leadership development. How's things, Dwayne?
Things are going well. I think I'm charging my friends and family co-pays from keeping them off the ledge with all the market up and down. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm doing right now, collecting co-pays.
Yeah, we're in a world now where for those who tend to watch the market, it's like this day it's up 5%, another day it's down 5%, and then we're up 5%, and maybe we're down a little more than we're up. But the volatility in the market is pretty crazy, and I think it's just one sign of the volatility of this world we're in, right? Like I talk about this we've gone from VUCA to BANI. Things are brittle, things are anxious, things are not, we can't comprehend them. Like the AI stuff is mind blowing, and it's all just hitting, perfect storm right now. But any big wins, personal and professional Q1, Dwayne?
I would say personally, my son moved out last week. He bought his own little loft. So he's in a
Wow.
loft. Yeah. So he's in a loft downtown St. Louis living his life. So
Congrats.
that's a win, you know. And then from a professional standpoint, I'd say one thing that I'm excited about is that I've done some work in terms of going back to rereading a couple books that
Hey,
I've done in the past. So many times we'll read books and then we won't apply the learnings, or we'll just like chime out some of the keys, pearls.
uh,
But I'm going back and really rereading to say, how have I actually lived some of these principles? And what I'll tell you is the notes that I've taken, I'm probably batting around 30%. It's been really an interesting inventory when I go through some of the books and the notes. I'm like, how much am I actually applying? I'm really only applying about 30% of it. So I'm going back and starting to double down on some of the
love
notes
it.
that I'm doing. So I'm excited about that, the reflection I'm doing there.
I love it. And I'm curious in the chat, if people, is there a book that you reread frequently? Is there a go-to book that you've read more than once? What is that book? And Dwayne, I think this is fascinating because I have such high curiosity, so openness to experience in the Big Five personality, where I'm always like, I don't even want to go to the same restaurant twice, right? Like, oh, I want to try that restaurant. I want to try that restaurant. So I've got a stack of books that like 100 that I need to read. And yet someone told me that we should reread our favorite books, several times through our life, because while the book hasn't changed, we've changed.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's good.
the
That's
way
good.
we would interpret it or understand it when you're 20 versus 30, 40,
Mhm.
soon to be 58, right? It's very different. And so that did change my mind about it. And I need to
Mhm.
spend more time rereading more books. There's a few meditations, Man's Fate, a handful I will do. But yeah, designing your work life, the Four Agreements, amazing.
Yeah.
Guide to the Good Life, anything
The,
Lencioni, Pink,
the Daily
The
Stoic is
Alchemist.
one that The Daily Stoic is one that I really enjoy. It's a one pager per day, but I've read that a couple times. And it's like the second, third year, I feel like I'm reading the book from a
Yeah,
completely different vantage point. So let me ask you this, Kevin. Now that
yeah.
we've had this conversation, what book are you going to reread, brother?
That is a good question because I have over my shoulder. It's kind of like,
That's
you know,
that you didn't write.
I do have to reread my own to remember what I said back in the day. But over my shoulder, I've got a bunch that I should reread. Um, but maybe meditations. That's one I like to read, every couple of years, and I haven't read that this year yet. But I have a short stack of books behind me that I was looking at. It's kind of like top shelf in a bar or in the liquor store. It's like
Mhm.
about a dozen books that I want to always know where they are, so I can kind of flip through them or grab them. And then I got all the just run-of-the-mill books around the rest of the office. So anyway. Dwayne, before we get to our guest speaker and the research, and I love research. You also know, and this will be new for some of the new folks here, that we don't do a lot of promotion, but we like to do a soft promotion by giving away something free. And this is the only thing that you'll hear about LeadX. And we are still so excited. It's going well. It was our big win in Q1 for the new LeadX workshop and certification for emotional intelligence. And so we just want to remind everyone that, we've 10x'd emotional intelligence. And with this workshop, it uses Ted Lasso videos, it uses culturally relevant, videos that we would all relate to. It's based on Travis Bradberry's brand new book, The New Emotional Intelligence, officially releasing May 6th. And the free part is if you've already been certified in Talent Smart or Blue EQ or MHSEQ, we will waive the fee. So you can come and get certified in Lead XEQ. Obviously, that will just waive that barrier of you having to go to your boss and saying, I need $3,000. And they'll be like, well, aren't you already certified in EQ? Right. Well, we think this is different enough that you should check it out, add this badge and experience to your kit. And if you've got a prior certification, then we'll waive that fee. And then it's a reminder that Dr. Bradbury is now saying like Lead XEQ is the only one he's recommending because we have 12 weeks of executive coaching for all the participants. It's the only program that lets you do unlimited retests. Most of the others, you get one. And it's the only one that's based on his new book and his new assessment. And so if you aren't ready to do a full certification, then the other free thing we can do for you is the 1 hour like executive workshop, executive preview workshop. And so we're trying to do them at least once a month, May, June, July. If you're interested in coming to one of these for free, just shoot an email to evan@leadx.org or DM us in the chat or send me an email, like one of us, reach out and we'll get you signed up for it. I think you are gonna love it. Dwayne, you went through it, right?
I did, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I gave you some feedback on it.
Yeah.
Definitely interactive, and I love the different approaches to emotional intelligence. Sometimes it can be very, I'm not going to say mainstream, right? But I love some of the, you and I chuckled about some of the videos and whatnot. I like the edginess, you know, because it needs
Yeah.
to be real. Let's have some real discussions of how you apply it. So I appreciated it for sure.
No, that's great. And it's interesting because as I'm now having conversations with heads of leadership development, heads, VPs of HR, I like this sounds biased, but I think EQ, it's always been popular, but I think it's going to move towards the top of the in-demand list as the AI stuff keeps going. So in a world where every device on your desk has super intelligence,
Right.
it's not about your ability, it's about your agility. It's not about what you know, it's about your relationships with who you know. And so I think that organizations and individuals are going to truly be like, yeah, the soft skills matter. We know that, but no, now they really matter. I mean, that's what we have to learn how to work together and thrive on teams. We can't rely just on the smarts alone. But anyway, I know I'm preaching to the choir in this.
Yeah, but to build on that again, just think about as we kind of automate more things with AI, we're thinking less, we're being less critical thinkers. Therefore, emotional intelligence is going to be that much more important because we're conditioning ourselves to literally be on autopilot and not really think as much. So I think what better way than to stay dialed into to emotional intelligence.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and it's again not to go too far deep, but there's going to be a whole level of EQAI interrelating. There was a paper released yesterday. I didn't dive into it, so I'm not ready to present a reaction on it. But where now they're having leaders interact with AI-powered fake team members as a way to assess leadership skills, and they're getting as good or better results than 360s and other survey-based measures.
Wow.
And so that's suggesting that AI-powered coaches and co-leaders are right around the corner. So just like they're using them for therapy bots, but fun stuff. But anyway, we're on that short format, so I'm going to move on with it because I am very excited. As I mentioned, we're delighted because LeadX is a partner with Hogan. We think Hogan has just incredible integrity when it comes to research-driven approach to personality assessment and leadership development. And they've got this new research that we're gonna hear about today: breaking the myths, advancing gender equity and leadership through science. My pleasure to introduce our new COP friend, Allison Howell. Allison, how are you?
Hi, I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Before we dive into stuff, just tell everyone, like, we're a big happy family here, 113 brothers and sisters, and you're a new family member. Where's home for you? And tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So I'm in Madison, Wisconsin. The company I work for, Hogan, is based in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So we have the luxury of remote work. Um, I've been at Hogan for all told, it's been about a decade or so. I've been with Hogan, as an employee for about 8 years, and then I have also worked with we have a very big global distribution network. So I worked with our French distributor for a couple of years, based out of Paris, France. So I drank the Kool-Aid and love all things personality. I'm really happy to talk about some of the research that we've done today.
Allison, I'm excited for this. The LeadX has worked with many corporate partners on different women in leadership initiatives, et cetera, et cetera. And we've seen, of course, recently sort of a backlash and or a clamping down of many DEIB programs. And this group, this community has talked about this in the last couple of meetings. When did Hogan decide to undertake this research? And was it before you kind of thought like, oh, not sure how this is going to land? Because I sort of feel like this is more important than ever before.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And actually, we started this research well before any of these more recent conversations have bubbled up. But some of this was prepared for a talk that I gave in New Zealand back in November, I think it was. So, last year and building on decades of data here, I think one thing to note with Hogan, the idea of, I won't say DEIB, but I'll say fairness is really part of the DNA of our culture. And we've got a long history with our founders starting their work really kind of at the time that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 came to pass, and we're looking at ways to evaluate talent in ways that don't discriminate. So it's really foundational. So it's been interesting with seeing some of these conversations recently, because we have really been steadfast in that belief that talent practices really need to be fair. Talent can come from anywhere. And so looking at ways to develop and recruit talent in ways that don't discriminate is really, really important. So that's always been true. I think it is more true now than ever. And we did have some hesitations about sharing some of this data just because of the current environment. And I think collectively at Hogan, we all said, no, this is who we are. This is really important. And it's not so much about leaning into DEIB initiatives as it is saying, this is what the evidence supports, and this is why it's valuable to have diverse voices and equitable practices to bring people to the table. So it's fun to keep the conversation going.
Yeah, and I want to, I've got a little bit of an ear for language. I want to remind everyone that, we had Kim Scott last month, and she was talking about DEI having a certain connotation now that isn't helpful for getting budgets and things. And so she was suggesting some new language. And I I just picked up, you talked about, this is basically fairness. Like, we don't need the fancy buzzwords. We're just talking about being fair and identifying talent, in a lot of places. And that makes sense. But enough on that. Allison, do you want to take over the slides and walk us through what you did? I'm excited to see it.
Yes. Give me just one second. Technology. Let's make sure it's working. Is that showing up for everyone?
Yep, we got it.
Okay, wonderful. All right, well, I'll dive right in. It sounds like there's some familiarity with Hogan here, so I won't talk a whole lot about who we are as a company, other than to say that our bread and butter is personality. I do just want to spend a little time as we dive into this just to talk about what we measure in terms of personality. Kevin, you mentioned alignment with the big five, and that is really true. And that is the HPI assessment. So it's the Hogan Personality Inventory. That's kind of our original assessment that actually teases out the 5-factor model into 7 different dimensions, but it is measuring personality in your day-to-day. And so the person that you're going to meet in a job interview is going to be what you see on the HPI report. But then we also have 2 other assessments that are really important and factor into the research that I want to share. So the Hogan Development Survey is, we like to call it the dark side. It gets a lot of intrigue from folks, but this is what we see, the behaviors that emerge oftentimes under stress, under complacency, unfamiliar situations. So things where you're not necessarily at your best, but we see some behavioral tendencies that emerge under those times. And then the MVPI is looking at the motivators, values, drivers, preferences, things that are sort of nourishing to you as a person in your workplace, and things that you're going to try to seek out to have some career satisfaction overall in life. So it sort of measures the full scope of personality beyond just the 5-factor. And because of that, the nuance that we get with these 3 assessments, it was able to it really informed the research in ways that are pretty impressive and pretty detailed.
Allison, I'm sorry, I'm going to be an interrupter a little bit, but on
Sure.
the previous slide, what I really want people to take away is I know many people, for example, embrace one of the simpler four quadrant models of behaviors like a DISC or something. And LeadX, for starting the conversation, sure. But one of the reasons why Hogan is unique, it's that dark side. These are, what other people called your derailers. Now, for many organizations, they'll be like, oh, that's too negative, or they're not ready for that. This is the biggest gift you can give to a high potential person. It's not like just your strengths, but it's like, hey, these are the things that could derail your career if you aren't aware of them. Let's get them out of the shadows, put a light on them, and they're gonna diminish it. So that dark side is very unique to Hogan. And if anyone here is not familiar with the model, follow up with Allison, follow up with me afterwards to check it out, because that is very special. And a question for you, Allison, before you continue. For this research, was it this trio that the data was based on, or did you also use your 360 to get like performance data?
Yeah. Actually, I will get into that. I do have
Oh,
a very geeky slide on the methodology, but
save it for the geeky slide
yeah,
then. Yeah,
yeah,
great.
I'll get into it. It's a pretty robust data set that we looked at. So let me just kind of get into a little bit more context setting here. And one caveat that I want to mention just up front is that we are really talking right now about gender and a dichotomy. We are not pulling in intersectionality right now, and that is really important. We have to work with the best data that we have available, and we have a lot of gender-based data. So I just want to kind of call that out. It's not to dismiss the importance of intersectionality or minimize that in any way, because that is really, really important. But for the purposes of this research, we're going to kind of talk about it as a dichotomy. So the current state, I probably don't need to share a lot of data because there's articles and research all over the place around women in leadership roles, but just kind of a few facts to pull out. One is that globally, only about 32% of roles are held by women. Leadership roles are held by women. 10% of the Fortune 500, I think they cracked 52, and it's held steady for the last couple of years. It hasn't seemed to climb much there, but really a small sliver of the overall Fortune 500. And there's some really interesting research from the World Economic Forum on gender gaps. And some of the data that they show is they label it as the drop to the top. There's other terms for it, like the glass ceiling, the broken rung phenomenon. But as people climb the corporate ladder, we see fewer and fewer women reaching those upper levels of leadership in an organization. One data point that really kind of jumped out to me, and that is that there are certain industries where the overall ratio tends to favor women, such as healthcare, consumer services, education, and yet when you look at the leadership breakdown, still at the manager and C-suite levels, there is still quite a gap there. And so to me, that really indicates that it is not the people involved. If you have a large pool of women to choose from, and it's still the men who are making it to the top, there's something else going on there. So I think it's really interesting to dig into that data. And then just because I feel obligated to share some ROI on why we're talking about this, there is a fair amount of data showing that there is some financial benefit for companies that have more diversity at the executive levels, but specifically with gender diversity here. So companies that have women on their executive committees have a 47% higher return on equity. People in the top quarter with gender diversity outperform those that don't, and the opposite is true as well. The organizations that are on the bottom quartile for diversity tend to underperform, and we do see this as being beneficial over time. There's some interesting research from Morgan Stanley looking at like share price performance and seeing how that is beneficial for organizations to have that gender diversity there. Maybe 1 second here. So, so we are seeing some progress. I think the value is fairly well known. There are still a number of stereotypes that exist out there, and I'll just populate all of these. This is just a small sampling of the articles are out there looking at what is happening. We maybe are seen as equally competent, but we're seen as less ambitious, or, are women really innovative? Are they able to handle the stress that you have? And one thing that strikes me in a lot of these articles is really looking at sort of what's inherently wrong with women that makes it hard for them to reach these levels, versus saying, okay, what's actually happening? So that led to our research question. So we started off with, we actually had this expanded out to 8 different statements and reduced it down here for the purposes of communicating out what we're doing. Statements that we hear a lot. So women aren't as ambitious as men. Women can't handle high stress leadership roles. Women are less decisive, are less likely to take risks, less strategic or innovative. Or my personal favorite is that women must adopt the masculine leadership characteristics to succeed. So here I'm getting to your question here about the data that we used. So we started off with 2 primary research questions. Do women and men differ in personality characteristics? And to clarify, women and men executives, because we do have a pretty large body of research showing that across the general population, there are not differences between men and women in personality. So this is really to pull out that executive population and see what differences might be there. And then looking at performance data as well. So do these personality characteristics predict performance differently than men versus women? I think one common thing that women hear a lot is that if you're ambitious, you have to kind of couch your ambition in ways, or you might be punished for being overly ambitious. So we wanted to test and see if that was true. So we have 3 different data sets looking at quite a bit of research on the personality side, over 20,000 for the sample size. And then we have supervisor ratings of performance, as well as looking at some competencies using our competency model, and then a data set from our 360 as well. So pause. I know this was a question for you, Kevin. So if there's anything you want to dig into here.
No, this was helpful. It was I was curious about that perception of effectiveness and everything, and that explains it. Makes perfect sense.
Yeah. All right. Well, I will just dive into these myths one by one. They do get a little technical, and I know that we don't have a ton of time to go through here, so I will go quickly, but please do stop if you want to dig into anything. So first, the statement of women are not as ambitious as men. And this is a myth. So from a personality standpoint, with this population, we see that men and women score very similarly on ambition. I do want to have the caveat here that when we are talking about the differences, we are talking about meaningful differences. So there are times that we do find statistically significant differences, which is really an artifact of the large sample size that we have. So you can see, as a raw score, there's not really a practical difference in somebody scoring a 90 versus a 91 on the ambition scale here. So the meaningful differences, practical differences that we can see in the way that people are interacting with each other. So very, very small differences between men and women on ambition, and that higher ambition scores do predict performance for both men and women. So, to answer the previous statement that women are in leadership roles are not punished for their ambition. They might express their ambition in different ways, but having that pure ambition is not detrimental to a woman in an executive role. So the myth number 2, the idea that women can't handle high stress leadership roles. And we have a couple of analyses here. So the first one is looking at our adjustment scale. So that our Hogan language is sometimes a little bit tricky. So this is going to be a more about emotional stability, the degree to which a person appears confident, stable under pressure in their day-to-day. And higher scores on adjustment are, it does help performance for both men and women. But again, we see very, very small differences, no meaningful differences between men and women on that emotional stability. And then the second measure under this one is looking at our excitable scale. So this is where we go into the dark side measures, seeing behaviors that appear under stress. And excitability is in some ways related to adjustment, but it's really the degree to which someone appears emotionally explosive, they're easily upset, under stress, they might have these really strong reactions and then calm down later. So it kind of leads to these big displays of emotion or negatively charged emotion. So this is one where we see that the men and women both score lower on the excitable scale. And there's not differences, but I think what's interesting is that emotional volatility hinders performance equally for both men and women. So the idea that men can be explosive and get a pass is not really true. I think it's detrimental to both genders there. So then myth number 3, women being less decisive or less likely to take risks than men. This we looked at on the dark side, our dutiful scale. So that refers to an eagerness to please, reluctance to act against popular opinion. Again, this is times under stress, and there's more of a likelihood to defer to others to help with decision making. So again, you're kind of seeing a theme here, but dutifulness is not helpful for both genders. And again, we don't really see much of a difference between men and women in executive roles. And then there's another scale on the dark side called our cautious scale. So that's looking at risk aversion, resistance to change, difficulty making decisions, and again, under stress. And this one I think is interesting because I think there's a perception that men are less risk averse than women are. And this really shows that it's not true. I think the more likely explanation is that the risk tolerance probably looks different. You see men being drawn stereotypically, of course, to more extreme sports or high stakes investing and things like that, where women's might be more strategic and calculated. But that risk aversion really doesn't differ between men and women there. All right. So then myth number 4 is the idea that women are less strategic or innovative than men. This was looking at our inquisitive scale or your curiosity, looking at your general interest, openness to experiences, curiosity about the world. So this, once again, we do see a slight difference with men executives being a little bit more curious, creative, but it's not a large difference. And again, it really doesn't predict performance differently for men or women. And this one has got a couple of different analyses as well. So this is looking at using our competency model, driving strategy and driving innovation. And again, I feel like I'm a broken record here in saying that it's kind of the same thing over and over, that in driving strategy and innovation, the differences are very, very small and the effect on performance is negligible. And then finally, the one I mentioned, this one was my favorite, about women must adopt masculine leadership characteristics to succeed. This one is using some 360 data. It's from our leadership versatility 360. And so this looks at it's sort of like the Goldilocks assessment of being too much or too little. And so it looks at this forceful dimension. And again, we see the differences between men and women are very, very small. And the predictions are, or there's really not any difference in terms of performance, excuse me. So this one I think is really, really interesting because much of the advice that women, I can speak from a personal experience, we receive is to be more assertive, be more direct, be more decisive, kind of embody these stereotypical masculine characteristics. But what this indicates to us is that that's not helpful for anybody, including men. And so rethinking what it means to be a leader is really important here. So that's just a quick rundown of that data, and I can conclude with some interpretation of all of this. But as we went through each one by one, seeing these are all a myth. All of these ideas are a myth from what the personality data show. I think one idea from this is that men and women are more similar than they are different in their characteristics, and we see more diversity among men and among women than across those groups. And I think that that's a really interesting idea because we just sort of naturally categorize the world around us. We, categorize the two different genders and make assumptions about the similarities there. But really, those differences are a lot of times, stereotypes. And so I think I really want to challenge everyone listening to this to kind of rethink your views of like what is a more, feminine and what is more masculine, because the personality data really doesn't support a lot of those stereotypes. The risk in all this is that we're missing out on great leaders. And I think that's really, really important. We love to talk about the difference between leadership emergence and leadership effectiveness. So emergence is people who stand out from the crowd. So your politicians, your highly charismatic people, the self-promoters, people who are going to really do a good job at getting noticed at work. And those are not necessarily people who are actually good leaders. Leadership effectiveness is about the team. It's about building and maintaining a high-performing team. And a leader that's emergent and effective, they're not necessarily the same profiles. You can be both, but we tend to focus on the emergent leaders and less on the effective leaders. And so, the message here is really looking at that effectiveness. What are the characteristics that somebody can bring to the table that can really build that high-performing team? And this is something I alluded to earlier is in the conversations around DEIB, that it really isn't about quotas. It's not about having a balanced board necessarily. It is about finding the best talent and making sure that the methods that you're using to both recruit and to develop your employees are equitable and fair and giving everyone a fair shot so that you can actually have the best talent come to the table and contribute to your organization. How am I doing on time here?
You're fine. You're good.
Okay. I just have a couple more slides, but I feel like, we're talking about effective leaders, and I think it's important to call out what does make an effective leader and what areas people need to watch out for. So on the day-to-day, many of these are the ones that we went through in the data here. On the day-to-day, the kind of the universal personality characteristics that help with leadership is, again, the Hogan language is pretty specific to us, but the adjustment, that emotional stability, being resilient, being composed on the day-to-day, being driven, showing self-confidence and energy, being able to listen. I talked about emotional intelligence earlier, and interpersonal sensitivity is highly related to that. So being diplomatic, warm, friendly, dependable. Prudence is more of like the conscientious on the 5-factor model, so organized and detail-oriented. And then on the dark side, the risks that leaders really need to pay attention to are that excitability, that kind of emotional volatility, not being overly risk averse or fearing failure. Reserved is kind of introverted, taken to the extreme, where you don't want to be around people when you're under stress. You sort of retreat within, and that creates a lot of problems when you're leading teams. And then, diligence is where it goes into the micromanagement or being inflexible. So those are things that, we all have our own derailers, but we want to be very aware of them to be able to manage them effectively. So what do we do with this information? I always say, when we've been looking at this data at Hogan, we know very well, and we see all the time, that personality doesn't differ across different groups. And we have a really large database. We do all sorts of adverse impact analyses. So we see that across groups, we don't see significant personality differences. So what do you do with the information that people aren't actually all that different? But I think this is really about kind of reframing the conversation and thinking about what we do with this. So of course, we're going to suggest using these fair and data-driven talent practices, using anything that's data-based, evidence-based. We're a highly academic organization, and so we want to make sure that the data is really solid. Using bias-reducing methods, that does not have to be personality, but of course we love that. But there are a number of other techniques of data backed or evidence-based techniques for recruitment and development that can really help reduce some of these biases. and other things like nudges and making sure that the language is gender neutral. Um, on the other side of it, many of these things need to be addressed in a systemic way. As I said up at the front of this, that much of the advice or the thought leadership on this is about addressing the people who are struggling to advance in the workforce, and it is really more of a systemic level issue. And so policies that support everyone working for you through parental leave, not maternity leave, parental leave, childcare assistance, mentorship and sponsorship is really important. Mentorship is, providing the development opportunities for people, whereas sponsorship is helping advocate for people who might not be highly emergent themselves, making sure that they have the opportunities to grow and advance there. Looking at systemic changes versus one-off initiatives, in this whole conversation around DEIB, a lot of times we kind of reduce the conversation to it's good or it's bad. And there are a number of initiatives out there that are not necessarily effective, and some of them can be actually counterproductive to the goals. And so looking at, evidence-based DEIB practices that actually do help provide opportunities to everyone, and the structural solutions versus individual behaviors, seeing reasons why certain groups might not be making it into the executive levels of the organization, really taking a good hard look at that. I think it's really important. So just to conclude, I know I threw a lot of information at you. Leadership effectiveness is shaped by personality. Also, culture and opportunity plays a really big role. Socialization is not a topic we really discussed here. That's really key. It's not just about removing barriers, but we really want to make sure that we're valuing the diverse talents, making sure that other voices are able to come to the table. It makes everyone better. So just to wrap it up, I think the key takeaway message here is that, if we can really kind of shift the narrative on what makes for a good leader, and look at the talents that people can bring to the table, we can be a lot more inclusive and strengthen our leadership teams in that way.
Allison, it's great. Busted all 5 myths, of course. We do have some questions, so I'm hoping we can spend a few more minutes.
Sure.
Like Donna asked, it's interesting. She said, because this study is of women who are already executives, could it be said that they're not reflective of typical women? And I do think there's some decent, quality meta-analysis and 5-factor that there are some gender differences on what you would call adjustment or negative emotion. Do you think this professional pool is a little different than the population at large?
I do think so. And I think this speaks to one of the limitations of this research, which is that, yes, this is looking at people who have already achieved reaching the executive level roles. So it is not looking at potential people who could get there. So that is an area for additional research and looking to see what factors might play into that. And we do have some ongoing research where we're kind of looking at what makes for an effective leader and kind of challenging some different attitudes. So yeah, I think it's a really good call out that because it does look at people who are already in executive roles, there are some assumptions around what enabled them to get into those executive roles.
Yeah. Dwayne, I know you had a question.
I did. Love the data. Absolutely love the data. And I love the reframing that it's not about balancing people, but finding the best people. I love that little verbiage in there, and it's so much truth to it. I did have a question. When you were talking about the ambition of men versus women, the sticking point where I normally see the difference of opinion and judgment is women that women after childbirth coming back to their careers. That's where I've seen the difference of judgment. Like, hey, are they as ambitious? Is there a difference between men and women? Right. And if you take this back to the late 90s, early 2000s, conversation was even a little more open about having that. Do you hire someone who is 28 years old that's looking to have a child, because is she going to come back more ambitious? Like, these are realities. Did you all take a look at anything like that?
I think that a really, really important question. It was not included in the data that I looked at. One of the challenges that we have from a methodology standpoint is that because we are a workplace assessment, we don't often have the opportunity to collect all the demographic data that we would like to be able to do deeper analyses. So that's the type of question that I can't answer from the data. I do think, though, that that really lends itself to a broader conversation around, what is preventing women from returning to the workforce after having children. And there's a lot of data out there showing that, household responsibilities fall disproportionately on women, and especially in the U.S., we do not have great childcare. I have 2 young kids myself, and I'm the primary breadwinner in the family. So this is something I feel acutely, because it is something that, as an organization, you want to be hiring somebody who's going to be the most reliable person, and having a family does take time and effort away from other priorities, certainly. But I think the conversation really needs to be more about how to provide the resources for women to balance their work and lives better than just continuing to pile on to women, because we end up just taking on more than the lion's share at home. There's quite a bit of data to back that up.
Allison, I'm feeling this might be a future research question. Hillary asked something I think is fascinating. She says, was there any difference observed in terms of performance reviews based on the gender of the evaluator?
That is a great question. I can't answer that, but I bet we could. I'm going to take that back.
That'd be fascinating.
Yeah, that is a very interesting question. I mean, I love talking about that. You can find all sorts of articles on, the language that is reserved for women versus men, and somebody who's assertive as a woman might be viewed as bossy or shrill or domineering and things like that. So you kind of think about those in terms of who's being evaluated, but certainly there is bias in terms of who's doing the evaluation, and men and women both can have biases. So great question. I'm really interested to see if we could find out an answer.
Allison, I'm going to hit you with one more, but then I do want to tell my co-producer, Evan, that I'm hoping we still have time for a 5-minute, maybe 7-minute breakout, meaning we might even have to do triads instead of larger, not sure. But before we send people their way, Allison, we had a couple of questions asking to go deeper into the demographics. Was this US only executives, or how much was outside the US? And what about industry? Was there any do you have manufacturing clients in the mix?
Yes. So unfortunately, I don't have the demographics at my fingertips, but that is something I could easily get. We have a very large swath of the general population. The personality data was global. I couldn't tell you the breakdown from which regions, but we do have a very, very global reach. So so I think it's a pretty good representation. The performance data and the competency model was US based, just because that's where, with the work that we do on the consulting side of our business, and where we can kind of gather that data, it tends to be more US centric. So I can also inquire if there is some global data to add to that as well. And then the 360s, that is global as well.
And then Allison, we only have one more minute, and I'm going to steal the question, because when I went through Hogan certification, one of the ahas is when they explained that certain personality profiles maybe didn't mean they were going to be a more effective leader, but they might have better leadership emergence. There's a difference between effectiveness and emergence. Mm-hmm. Can you just speak to that concept and how it might apply to how men and women are showing up at work?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of the underlying thing with that is that oftentimes we're sort of starting off with a faulty definition of what makes a leader. So when you think about leader, you're oftentimes thinking of the person in charge, because that's, it's kind of tautological there. But what a good leader is somebody who can build that team and create the team that's going to be highly performant. So it's not about the leader, it's about the team. And that, I think, is kind of the crux of this. So when we talk about emergence, this sort of goes into that first definition. It's somebody who's going to be able to stand out, who's going to be able to climb the ladder, play the game, get noticed, get ahead, seek out those, the opportunities that they can. That's not inherently a bad thing, but you do run the risk of somebody who's going to be only out for themselves and not have the skills or the abilities or even the interest to build the team. So the leadership effectiveness is really about building the team and having a team that's highly performant and cohesive and able to accomplish the goals set out. So it's those two definitions that are sort of underlying those. But emergence, I don't want to say it's not important, because you do need to have a leader who's going to inspire and get people to kind of follow behind, but you have to make sure that there is that ability to bring people along, and the effective behaviors tend to be more of a long-term thing, whereas the emergent behaviors tend to be just kind of what's visible. And over time, we might just see that those emergent leaders don't have the ability to be that effective.
Yeah, Allison, thank you so much for the great work you're doing and sharing it today. Hopefully we take all of this data back to our colleagues, and we will be sending the notes out next week, but people can download the research from your website, from the Hogan website. Because it helps to overcome the bias that is unfortunately still there. So thank you for that. And on that note, we're gonna do a quick breakout, 5 minutes. I encourage everyone to hang out for it. It's casual, it's fast, and when you come back, we'll do the top 5 plays of the month. And we're just creating some space for all of you to meet some new friends. You can do what you want with the space, maybe introduce yourself, share what was your #1 takeaway from this research from Hogan. And I'd be curious for you to share with each other, does your company offering a women in leadership program? Why or why not? And just do that quickly. You'll make new friends that you can stay in touch with on LinkedIn, and we'll call you back in 5 minutes. There wasn't a lot that caught my eye this month, but I want you to go through these, take your phone and snapshot them if you want to follow up on the internet, or just wait for our notes next week. Mercer, I really respect them and their research, Workforce 2.0, Unlocking Human Potential. And these are skills that CEOs want to, what's the number driver transformation, upskilling, reskilling, mental well-being initiatives. I don't know that companies are putting their money where their survey answering is, so I don't know about that. I thought this was interesting from Gallup. We've clearly settled in. So 26% of the workforce is now exclusively remote. 19% is fully 5 days a week. And most of us, 55%, are hybrid, probably 3 days a week, right? So I think this is still going to evolve a little bit, but we all kind of wondered how it was going to settle out. I think this is it. McKinsey Quarterly, upgrade your personal operating model in these crazy times. Snapshot this with your phone to come back to it, but we got to relook at our priorities. Focus on your role. Are you leveraging your strengths? Who has your back? Network, more important than ever. Time, be careful, be protective of it. And energy, how are you protecting your energy? I thought these were great reminders for all of us. I love a good world happiness report, Dwayne. Every year I'm curious, and I root for the United States. Come on, are we climbing the ladder? No, the United States is not even a top 10. So say what you want about all these countries. We don't like their taxes. We don't like their whatever. They're cold. Who wants to live in Finland? It's so cold, or whatever we all think. Hey, they got happiness figured out and wired. I think this list is fascinating. And when you download the report, there's 200 pages about the keys to happiness. How can we be happy in our own household? Caring and sharing meals with others, living with others, connecting, supporting, trusting. Keyword, others, others, others. This is bad news for a massive introvert like me, but I know if I do this, I'm going to be a little bit more happy. On that note, we've got #1. Everybody's got to rush out to gamma.app. Gamma.app. You feed it a document. And it will spit out in minutes a beautiful PowerPoint presentation for you. I tried this, every 6 months I try this. It's those slides stink. I'm never using this. This is the first time I'm these are McKinsey level slides, all generated in minutes, and then you can edit them. You can put your template in. Check that out. That was my top 5. Dwayne, it's Friday. We're heading into the weekend. Bless us with some wisdom.
Well, I would say I'm going to go with what that happiness report, right? The happiness report and where we ranked in the U.S. And I think it comes down to we're really low on that because we're too busy being everything but ourselves. We're so busy focusing on everything but ourselves. And if I were to steal something from John Mason, he says, everyone's born an original, don't die a copy. So let's take a moment to just reflect, refine, and then re-engage in our authentic selves. And when we do that, we can definitely not only leave ourselves better, but leave the world better.
Reflect, refine, re-engage. My God, you're on fire today, Dwayne. Thank you for that message. Thanks for showing up. Thanks, everyone. Time is your most valuable asset, and you shared it with each other.